It did no good to open her eyes. The nightmare continued. Malinali walked without walking, saw without seeing, spoke without speaking, was there and was not there. She lived through the dramatic events of the killings without having seen them, heard them, or registered them in her memory. She had no space in her mind for the present because the images of the past, images of horror, took up all the room. She experienced the return to Tenochtitlan as in a dream. They returned through Lake Texcoco, their canoe sliding smoothly through its waters. This time there was no welcome, no escort of nobles awaiting them, for the majority of them were dead. It had been a month since the massacre in the great temple, and the smell of death still lingered in the air. As they made their way into the city, Malinali's heartbeat grew faster as sorrow ran through her veins. To calm herself, she closed her eyes and tried to think of nothing. She did not want to see the signs of the calamity. When they arrived at the place of Axayacat, Cortés went directly to Pedro de Alvarado to ask for explanations. He had left him in charge because he had thought that he would be able to handle the Tenochtitlans, who looked on him as a representation of Tonatiuh, the god of the sun. When they addressed him, they did not use his name, but instead called him Sun. Cortés had not counted on the fact that the responsibility he entrusted the man with would be more than he could handle. The fear of losing control had caused him to organize the massacre. It was true that ever since the Spaniards arrived, the proud Tenochtitlans looked on them with suspicion. They did not understand the actions of their governor Montezuma. As a ruler, he had distinguished himself for his valor, his wisdom, his intense religiosity, and his firm hand in controlling the empire. Confronted with the Spaniards, however, he proved to be weak and submissive, which did not cease to amaze the Tenochtitlans. People in the street asked themselves if Montezuma had lost his mind, if Tenochtitlan was without a head, without a leader. It did not take long for a resistance movement to arise, headed by the lords Cacama of Texcoco, Cuitláhuac of Ixtapalapa, and Cuauhtémoc, Ahuitzot's son. From this perspective, it seemed logical that Pedro de Alvarado, fearing an insurrection that he could not control with the few men that he had been left with, decided to murder the finest warriors and most distinguished nobles who had participated in the celebrations. The massacre provoked the feared insurrection. Cortés asked Montezuma to speak to his people from the roof garden of his palace to pacify them, but the governor was not well received by the people. The Tenochtitlans, enraged, hurled insults and stones at him. Montezuma was hit 3 times. The Spanish said that this had been the cause of his death, but according to the testimony of the natives, he was assassinated by the Spaniards themselves. Malinali did not enter the game of explanations. She did not say anything. The effect of having been the last one to have looked into the emperor's eyes before they took him to his quarters kept her living in a time that wasn't the present. She asked herself if her nightmare was part of reality or reality part of her nightmare. And where was she anyway? Without knowing it, she saw how the Mexicans elected Cuitláhuac, Montezuma's brother, as the new emperor, who immediately organized his people to confront Cortés and his men. He did it so well that he forced the Spanish to initiate a retreat. They decided to flee at night, when the city was peaceful, so that they could take with them all the treasures that they had accumulated. The only time that Malinali reacted and placed herself in the present moment was when they were fleeing. The Tenochans were chasing them. One of their arrows wounded the horse that had always been her ally, the one who had been with her during the baptism, at the massacre in Cholula, in the battle against Pánfilo de Narváez, her eternal and unconditional friend. When Malinali saw him fall wounded, time stopped. The sounds of the battle froze in the air. She could not hear anything. Everything that surrounded her disappeared from her field of vision. Only the horse existed. Only the horse was dying. Malinali felt a profound sorrow. She did not want to leave him there fallen and suffering. She embraced him and in his eyes saw fear, pain, suffering. Immediately it brought to mind Montezuma's eyes after he had been wounded by the stones. There was kindness in those eyes. There was greatness. There was elegance. Malinali forcefully grabbed the cudgel she was using to fight the Tenochans and delivered a mortal blow to the horse's head. Then she pulled out a blade and in a fit of madness cut off its head. She wanted to take it with her, to honor it as it deserved. She did not want it to be a feast for worms. She was so wound up in her task that she lost sight that she was still fleeing, that the battle continued, that her life was in danger. Juan Jaramillo was the one who noticed a Tenochan grab Malinali by the hair, about to behead her. Jaramillo fired his harquebus and killed him, then ran and took hold of Malinali, who was still cutting the horse's head off, and dragged her to the outskirts of the city, where they sat to lament their defeat. Malinali, again absent, remained with her head on the shoulder offered by Jaramillo. He had displayed great strength and courage that night. Malinali regretted not having made off with the horse's head, Cortés with all of his treasures. The defeated Cortés took up refuge in Tlaxcala, where he recovered and gathered his strength. Meanwhile, an epidemic of smallpox brought over by the Cuban slaves that had arrived with the Spanish ravaged the people. One of the victims was the Emperor Ciutláhuac himself, who perished from it. Then Montezuma's cousin, the young Cuauhtémoc, took the throne. One of his first actions was to order the execution of 6 of Montezuma's sons who were attempting to yield to the Spaniards. In spite of the epidemic, he gave orders and took measures for the defense of the city. He knew that Cortés, supported by the Tlaxcaltecans, was preparing a new invasion of Tenochtitlan. Cortés had 13 ships built to seize the city from the lake surrounding it. Warriors from Cholula, Huejotzingo, and Chalco joined him. According to his calculations, he would be able to bring together more than 75,000 men. Cuauhtémoc confronted the Spaniards by attacking them from the rooftops as they passed through the streets. Cortés ordered all houses destroyed, and so began the devastation of the city. In one of his campaigns, Cortés was able to reach the Great Temple, but the Mexicans attacked him from the rear and were able to capture more than 50 Spanish soldiers. That night, from their camp, the Spaniards heard the hymn of triumph and knew that the captured soldiers had been sacrificed in the great temple itself. Cortés decided to lay siege to the city, taking hold of the roads that connected it to the mainland, while controlling access by water with the ships and canoes of his allies. At the same time, he had the aqueducts of Chapultepec, which provided Tenochtitlan with fresh water, destroyed. He intended to make them surrender from thirst and hunger. The Tenochtians resisted in Tlatelolco. It was in the market, in the heart of the empire, that the final blow was dealt to the people of Tenochtitlan. There had been so many deaths from smallpox and hunger that the Spanish were finally able to overcome them. The day of the fall, they killed and captured over 40,000 natives amid a loud chorus of screaming and weeping. Cuauhtémoc tried to flee, but was captured and brought before Cortés. "Lord Malinche," he said when in his presence, "I have done my duty in defense of my city and vassals, and I cannot go on. So I come by force, a prisoner before your person and power. Take that knife from your belt and kill me with it." Cortés did not kill him, but instead took him prisoner, having his feet burned until he would reveal where the gold was hidden, the gold that his troops had lost during their flight on the sorrowful night.